Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Okay, today we're really trying to unpack a nation whose story is, well, much richer and more complex than many people realize. We're talking about Mongolia. Let's get straight to what you need to know about this place. It's a land of really fascinating contradictions, and it has this unique, often challenging economic path ahead. So our mission today is simple. Take a stack of sources. We've got excerpts from Mongolia, a nation of contrast and economic destiny, and that includes Mongolian News EP1, and basically pull out the key nuggets. This is your shortcut, really, to getting informed quickly about this unique nation. And what's really compelling, I think, highlighted in the sources, is that this perspective is heavily influenced by how a younger generation sees their country. It's not just stats. It's insight shaped by the people who are going to inherit Mongolia's future.
Yeah, and that perspective is so vital because what's truly fascinating here is how this country, which might seem really distant, deep in Central Asia, it actually holds such significant lessons about geology, geography, global power dynamics, and that delicate balance between tradition and, rapid change. We'll be looking at the really critical questions around Mongolia's future, especially, how it navigates the modern world while holding on to those deep ancient roots.
Okay, let's kick off with a fact from the sources that, honestly, it surprised me. Mongolia is the 18th largest country in the world by land mass. Just think about that sheer size. But despite being enormous, the population is, relatively small. Estimated for 2025 at only around 3.4 million people. That's a huge amount of land, very sparsely populated. But here's where it gets even more complicated. The source notes, it used to be 16th largest, but its borders have apparently shrunk. The material actually describes this as being due to, and I'm quoting here, remedial methods of China and Russia fox-like plans to slowly get the territory.
Wow, that phrase, fox-like plans. It's incredibly stark, isn't it? Really revealing. It tells you immediately about this deep-seated historical anxiety, a sense of strategic vulnerability that's just part of Mongolia's national consciousness. This isn't just lines on a map, right? It speaks to centuries of being stuck between these two enormous, powerful neighbors. This feeling of territorial pressure, both historically and now, it's definitely shaped Mongolia's psyche, its diplomacy, fostering this kind of cautious pragmatism, even as they try to assert their identity. It's constant tension underneath everything.
So you've got this vast, maybe shrinking territory on one hand, and on the other, this really interesting demographic picture. Mongolia has a remarkably young population. The median age is about 28. Now, on the surface, that sounds great, doesn't it? It signals huge opportunities, a vibrant workforce, potential for innovation, a dynamic future. But I'm guessing this youthful potential comes with some big challenges, too.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely isn't straightforward. While, yes, a young population is a massive asset, the research we looked at points to a critical problem: the corrupt use of budget funds. And, how the country's vast natural resources are managed. This often creates a disillusioning environment for the brightest young people. So it leads many to look for better futures elsewhere, immigrating. It's that classic brain drain problem. And a huge factor pushing them, unfortunately, is that Ulaanbaatar, the capital, is one of the most air-polluted cities globally, especially in winter. Just imagine you're young, ambitious, you see your country's wealth possibly being mismanaged, and you're breathing some of the worst air daily. The pull of opportunities abroad becomes incredibly strong, and losing that talent long-term, that could really hold back Mongolia's development.
That's really tough reality for such a promising generation. And speaking of traditions, it's incredible that around 30% of Mongolians still live a nomadic or semi-nomadic life. That's one of the highest rates anywhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
A real testament to their cultural heritage, that connection to the land.
It is remarkable how they've preserved that tradition against, all the pressures of modernity. But the sources do acknowledge that because of global changes, climate change, urbanization, economic pressures, this nomadic lifestyle is slowly, maybe inevitably fading. And when that goes, it's not just a way of living that's lost. It's centuries of knowledge about the land, about animals, a whole unique social structure. It's a really delicate, almost heartbreaking balance, preserving heritage versus adapting to the 21st century.
And adding another layer to that picture, that deep connection to the environment. Get this. Livestock in Mongolia vastly outnumber people, more than 20 animals for every single person. That really paints a picture of a pastoral economy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A profound link to animals.
It absolutely does. And it's not just a quirky fact. It really underscores how fundamental animal husbandry is. To the economy, yes, but also to the cultural identity. The sheer number of livestock impacts everything: land use, grazing, the daily lives of so many families. It's a living example of the sustainable, though increasingly challenged, relationship.
Right. Yet despite all these vast open spaces, the nomadic life, Here's another one of those amazing contrasts. More than half of Mongolia's entire population lives in just one city, Ulaanbaatar. And it's famous for being one of the coldest capitals on Earth. Really harsh, long winters, temperatures plummeting. But almost poetically, it's also known as the land of the eternal blue sky. They get over 250 sunny days a year. Imagine that. Freezing cold, but bathed in sunshine.
And it's exactly those contradictions, isn't it? The vastness versus the population density in the capital, the ancient nomadic life versus modern urban challenges, like the air pollution we mentioned. These things truly define Mongolia's unique identity. They're not just interesting points, they are fundamental tensions shaping the country's path. They create both opportunities and, well, real dilemmas. How do you govern a nation with such extremes? That's the core question, really.
That's a perfect way to transition, actually. Because now we need to shift focus to the economic engine of Mongolia. This is where a lot of its global significance really comes from. Mongolia is exceptionally rich in natural resources. And I mean rich. Huge, globally important reserves of coal, copper, gold, and even rare earths.
Right, and just to quickly clarify for listeners, rare earth, that's a group of 17 metallic elements. They are absolutely critical for high-tech stuff. Think smartphones, electric cars, wind turbines, defense tech. They all rely heavily on these rare earths. So Mongolia's reserves aren't just valuable economically, they're strategically vital too, on a global scale.
And to put some numbers on it, to show just how crucial these resources are. Mining makes up over 25% of Mongolia's GDP. Remember, GDP is the total value of everything produced in the country, a key measure of economic health. And maybe even more startling, mining accounts for around 90% of its total exports. Think about that. Almost everything they sell to the world, almost all the foreign currency they earn, comes from digging stuff out of the ground.
And that overwhelming reliance, as you can imagine, leads to incredible economic volatility. Our sources describe it as a kind of roller coaster economy. You see years of amazing double-digit GDP growth when mining booms, when global commodity prices are high. But the flip side is brutal. Downturns hit incredibly hard and fast when those prices fall. This boom and bust cycle creates massive instability, makes long-term planning almost impossible. It exposes them to what economists sometimes call the resource curse if it's not managed very, very carefully. It's just this constant state of uncertainty.
Yeah, and we've seen the real impact of this volatility again and again. The sources highlight that during these downturns, Mongolia has often had to go to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, for help to stabilize things. A key example was 2017, they turned to the IMF again for a big support package just to shore up their finances. It's not a one-off, it's a recurring theme.
Exactly. The IMF usually steps in when a country faces serious balance of payments issues or a crisis. And these rescue packages, they usually come with strings attached, right? Conditions, often requiring structural reforms, budget cuts, maybe privatization. For Mongolia, needing IMF help repeatedly really underlines how vulnerable their economy is. And those conditions can sometimes affect their national sovereignty over economic policy, which adds another layer of complexity.
Which brings us to what our source calls a fun fact, but has really deep implications. It says Mongolia's economic growth largely remains tied to mining booms, which are in turn heavily reliant on the Chinese market. This isn't just an observation. What are the real, maybe immediate impacts of focusing so heavily on one sector and, frankly, one main customer?
Well, for starters, it seriously limits their ability to diversify, to build other parts of the economy. It leaves them incredibly exposed to sudden price shocks or, crucially, shifts in Chinese policy. Imagine if China slows its industrial growth or finds other suppliers. Mongolia's economy feels that immediately, profoundly. We've seen this pattern in other resource-rich nations. It often leads down that resource curse path if the wealth isn't smartly invested elsewhere, education, infrastructure, other industries. This reliance essentially means Mongolia's economic fate is, to a large degree, tied to decisions made in Beijing. It creates this powerful economic squeeze that directly impacts their political wiggle room, and managing national debt becomes a nightmare.
That's such a crucial point. And it leads us right into our next bit. Mongolia's unique geopolitical situation. It's landlocked, firstly, which always makes trade and development harder. But more importantly, it's literally sandwiched, as the source says, between two global giants, Russia to the north, China to the south. This isn't just geography. It means Mongolia's choices, its resources, even its stability, they all become highly relevant to the bigger power dynamics in Asia and beyond.
Yeah.
It's a critical strategic spot.
Exactly right. This unique position forces Mongolia into this incredibly delicate balancing act. Historically, maybe it was a buffer state, But today, in modern geopolitics, it's more like a resource bridge, potentially a strategic corridor. Its huge mineral reserves, especially those rare earths we mentioned, give it this quiet importance to both its neighbors, and by extension, to other global powers wanting access. Managing these relationships isn't just about diplomacy, it's about national survival, economic health.
And you see this geopolitical position playing out very clearly in the economics. An overwhelming majority of Mongolia's exports, we're talking 85 to 90%, mostly minerals go to China. That's almost everything, heading to one single customer.
And that is the big so what here. You've got vast mineral wealth right next door to China, a massive resource-hungry market. So naturally, this heavy reliance develops. But the downside is huge vulnerability. Any shift in Chinese demand, any change in their import policies, any swing in global commodity prices, it directly translates into potential economic chaos for Mongolia. This economic leash also makes managing the national debt a constant, often frustrating challenge. Downturns can quickly balloon the debt, making repayments harder. It's a really tight spot that demands very clever long-term thinking.
You know, the material we looked at points out something interesting here. It describes Mongolia's strategic spot between Russia and China as playing a unique role in geopolitics and trade. But the sources don't really spell out how Mongolia might be actively using this position, like specific strategies to reduce that economic dependence on China, or to really bolster its sovereignty beyond just getting international loans. It's clearly important strategically, but how they leverage that isn't detailed in these specific sources we have.
Yeah, and that lack of explicit detail in public sources, that's quite telling in itself, isn't it? It highlights just how complex and maybe how sensitive these strategies really are. If you think about the bigger picture, it raises that fundamental question for any nation in a similar spot. How do you balance your natural economic advantages, like resources, with the absolute strategic need to diversify and maintain real independence, especially when you're caught between giants? Hypothetically, a country might try to diversify trade routes, attract investment from other partners, not just neighbors, engage more in multilateral forums for international support, maybe even try to play the big powers off against each other, though that's incredibly risky. The fact that strategies aren't laid out could mean they're very subtle, maybe still being worked out, or deliberately kept quiet for diplomatic reasons. It really is a high-stakes balancing act. Very few easy answers.
That really ties it all together nicely, I think. What we've explored today is that Mongolia is truly this land of incredible natural wealth, deep ancient traditions, yet it's facing these very modern, very pressing challenges. Economic volatility tied to global markets, serious environmental issues like the air quality in Ulaanbaatar, and this constant delicate dance navigating its powerful neighbors, Russia and China. It's a nation trying to carve out its future, balancing that desire for prosperity with the need to honor its past and just manage its present in this incredibly complex world.
And that leads us to a final, maybe provocative thought for you, our listener. When you consider everything Mongolia's rich resources, its young, energetic population, a huge plus, and that unique geopolitical squeeze, what do you think is the single most critical step for Mongolia to take to ensure a future that's stable, prosperous, one that truly reflects that eternal blue sky potential, rather than just the ups and downs of commodity prices? Is it radical economic diversification, a much bolder diplomatic game, or maybe something else entirely, focused more on internal strength, innovation?
Exactly. It's a really fascinating case study, isn't it? How nations try to balance resource wealth with long-term independence and taking care of their environment. We really encourage you to think about that question and perhaps explore more about how countries like Mongolia are navigating their path in this complicated, always changing world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.